Greetings, cinephiles. Are you looking for a movie analysis podcast that stands above the rest? Then look no further than Collateral Cinema, the only movie podcast that matters.
We analyze good movies, we analyze bad movies, and yes, we also analyze the in-betweens of the world of cinema.
So if you like what you hear, find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
And listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts.
And yes, my friends, we are 420 friendly. So when you listen to us, smoke it if you've got it. And now, here's a new episode of Collateral Gaming. The show starts right now.
I'm Ashley Chancellor.
And I'm Beau Maddox.
And this is Collateral Gaming.
Take that!
Welcome back to Collateral Gaming, the only video game podcast that matters, where we focus on good games, bad games, and everything else in between in the world of gaming. We are podcasting straight from somewhere in Texas, and yes, my friends, we are a 420 friendly podcast, so whatever you have, be it bongs, blunts, or joints, smoke it if you've got it.
Indeed.
And welcome to part 2 of Collateral Gaming's Logic and Reasoning Spectacular on the mystery of the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. If you haven't listened to part 1, I recommend you go check that out first. And this episode especially, I think that applies, as today we are going to be talking about the Great Ace Attorney 2 Resolve. So in part 1, we covered the first of the duology, the Great Ace Attorney Adventures. Now we're talking about the Great Ace Attorney 2. And, Beau, I've been super excited to talk about this with you, to cap up our thoughts on this duology.
Oh, man, I've been playing through this game like crazy lately, and I'm so taken by this whole world in these games, and the little family that Runo and Susie kind of make with Iris and Hurley. It's great to see, but I mean, especially when some of the more shocking events start to come up, it really kind of puts everything that you know about the previous game to the test a little bit, if you get what I'm saying, you know?
Yeah, definitely. So this game in particular is very much a continuation of the previous story. I think we probably mentioned that in the previous episode, that the Great Ace Attorney games, unlike most other Ace Attorney games, don't operate as standalone stories. They're very much two parts of the same adventure. And so a lot of the mysteries that don't get resolved by the end of Great Ace Attorney 1 are expected to be resolved by the end of Great Ace Attorney 2. And I'm just going to go ahead and say that I think that everything gets wrapped up with a nice little bow here. I mean, I don't even really see much future in Ryunosuke and Susato's stories here. I feel like everything really kind of has a nice conclusion.
You're not wrong there, honestly. And we were actually talking about that not too long ago. As a matter of fact, I think we were talking about it last night, as to how they could possibly, continue in the Great Ace Attorney universe. And it's like, we were thinking the only real way to go about it would be to do an investigation style spinoff, with mainly featuring Hurley, Iris, and maybe Eugene Mikotoba.
Yeah, I could see like an investigation style spinoff, and especially since we're getting the Investigations collection here in the West, that would be pretty cool to get like a Great Ace Attorney Investigations game focusing on Herlock, because, again, he is the breakout character. He is 100% my favorite character of this franchise. And we get to explore him in even greater depth in this game. This is where we really get to see how Herlock's mind ticks, the intricacies of his great partnership.
Yeah. And I really like the subtlety that we're given in his character, especially when we start to realize that, oh shit, he hasn't been as haphazard in his deductions and reasoning as we were led to believe. He was actually doing that for Ryunosuke and for Susato more than anything,
Yeah, we talked about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, he was basically kind of instructing them in his methods, more or less.
That's how I see it, and we talked about that a little bit in the last episode, I remember. But I think that Great Ace Attorney 2 really kind of points to that more so than anything. Like any suspicions you might have had of the first game, I think are pretty much resolved here, especially once you get to that final dance of deduction with Eugene Mikotoba, who is the actual John Watson of this universe. The person we thought was John Watson or named in this universe as John Wilson was a red herring.
Yeah, that was actually a really interesting narrative choice right there, and actually really threw me for a loop there. And even throwing in that implication of him possibly being Iris's daddy, It's like, I mean, it's a really interesting way to kind of take the what we know about Holmes and Watson and kind of turning it upside its head a little bit. Even having him being a former Japanese student that studied in Great Britain and everything. So I mean, yeah, it's a very interesting take on these really, really memorable characters.
Yeah, it really is. And I think I mentioned it before that this might well be my favorite adaptation of the Holmes character. Like, I just feel like he's got that right level of accuracy while being just a little bit more zany, fitting into the Ace Attorney universe. And that's perfect. And we actually even get to kind of explore that a little bit further here. There's a question that's raised early on as to whether Kazuma might really be alive before it's revealed that he actually is. And, Ryunosuke and Susato have to ask Holmes, or Sholmes, well, why did you lie about that? And they don't answer that until the very end of the game. So...
Yeah. I mean, well, in his words, great detectives are wont to lie. So, I mean, it's just part of his methods up to that point. But, I mean, yeah, it does get explained later on in the game.
Yeah. And of course, we get my favorite dance and deduction section in this entire duology. And that's the gravity bomb one.
Yeah, in Enoch Dreber's engineering lab. It's like, no, that was fantastic because... it's just so incredibly improbable and actually impossible that he straight up admits it at first. It's like, look, we're going to do this logic and deduction, but, keep in mind, this is not technically possible.
Yeah.
So
he posits it as a theory, goes into it. We get through the entire dance of deduction, and at the very end of it, I think it's Susato who asks, well, Mr. Sholmes, is such a device actually possible? He's like, no, as a matter of fact, it is impossible. Such a device cannot exist at this time. But that he wants it to be true.
He's really trying to will that into existence. And even just what happens while he's going through his deductions and, the gravity effect that comes into play. I mean, that was actually really well done. And I will also say that going back to his dance of deduction with Mikotoba, I love Mikotoba's dancing in that. His little tap dance that he does before he does a deduction.
We see what it's really like funny. With the proper partner, right? Somebody who's already well acquainted with Sholmes' methods, can think almost as quickly as he can, a little bit further along than Ryunosuke was. And that really makes the world of difference. That and Sholmes admits, I think, right before the deduction. And this is the nail in the coffin that suggests that up to this point, Sholmes has just been messing around, because he specifically says something to the effect of, there's no time to play games here. We have to be serious. So
yeah. Yeah, and the way that deduction actually plays out, it's without a lot of the supposed hand holding that Runo and Susie give you in between deductions and observations and everything, and you're pretty much left to you have to actually really observe and actually come up with the right answer right off the bat and everything. So
yeah, it's more of a baton pass, and of course Sholmes has still already figured it out, and Mikotoba's kind of picking up on the end of it, but you get the impression that in universe, it's just like that. It's like a baton pass, and Mikotoba picks up and he knows what Sholmes is driving at, and they complete the conclusion together. And it's really quite amazing, and they play just one of the most phenomenal tracks in this game while they're doing it.
Oh, I love that final deduction music, man. That was really fucking cool.
Yeah, it's so good with the tap dancing and everything, and it's fucking awesome.
And also we get another stroganoff as well. We get chicken stroganoff. Duh. It's like we get another stroganoff. It's like, what of world famous traveler chicken stroganoff? It's fantastic. I love it.
I love it. Yeah. So one of the notable things about this game is that actually it had less of a budget than the first game did. That's why they dropped the anime cutscenes in favor of just straight up 3D animated cutscenes.
Yeah, and we get some of the only voice acting in the game as well through those cutscenes. And honestly, I actually liked it, man. I mean, the game engine really lends itself well to those types of cutscenes.
It does, but I do kind of miss the anime cutscenes. I thought that they were a nice touch.
Yeah. The anime was a good touch in the first game. That was really cool.
But it works.
Especially when we first get introduced to Sholmes and everything in the second case.
Right. And like the first game, this one also has a little bit of a strange pacing. It doesn't actually pick up again until the third case, right? That was kind of the case with the first game as well.
Yeah. The second case in this game is actually a flashback to another case involving Soseki Natsume. It's like poor Soseki, damn it! It's like he cannot get a break in Great Britain. It's so sad.
There's a
I'm
reason.
Just like damn it.
I know, poor Soseki. There's a reason for that actually, though. So apparently, the case that ends up being the what do they? I think they call it the Memoirs of the Clouded Kokoro in this game.
Yeah, Memoirs of the Clouded Kokoro. Yeah,
was originally the second half of the Adventure of the Clouded Kokoro in the first game.
Okay.
And so those two characters that show up, Mr. Meterman and Mr. Shamspear, who show up for a single scene in the first game and then are never mentioned or referenced again, that was like a build-up to their full appearance. And so there was going to be a second crime that took place immediately within the same case or chapter, episode.
I can see why they kicked that down, why they kicked that can down the road a little bit, because honestly, I cannot fucking stand Shamspear at all. Oh my god, that look, dude, that look on his face when he's in court, that look on his face, I was like, ooh.
Oh,
that made me so mad.
Oh, I know.
He's
a fucking bastard and a half. We'll get into the individual cases here in a minute, but. So that case was actually was part 2 of the original case, and the first game takes as long as it does to get going. So I think that it was good that they scrapped that, and then when deciding where they were going to come up with cases for the second game and having sort of a budget cut, what they decided to do was just implement the idea that they had originally had and use it as a flashback case and sort of tie it into the narrative. And you can tell it was sort of shoehorned in there, but it works.
A little bit.
The pacing of this is also kind of odd, which is similar to the first game in that, like, the first case takes place once again in Japan. It's a tutorial case. You're actually playing as Susato. And then the second case is this flashback case. And then you finally jump to the present, to the events after case 5 of the Great Ace Attorney. And then those last 3 cases are all pretty much one story. Again,
Yeah,
like the first
yeah.
game, after you get to that third case, everything else kind of blends together. But especially so here, the final two cases actually concern the same crime, but there are more far-reaching consequences as a result of what's been uncovered. Going back to the mystery of the Reaper of the Bailey and the Professor killings. So, and we'll talk about that here in a second. Actually, I guess this is as good a time as any to kind of start digging into each case, right?
Yeah. Let's do that. Let's do that. I mean, because, man, I really do like the way that these cases were kind of structured and how it plays out with the narrative. I mean, it actually really interacts with the cases in the previous game very well. I really like that. So yeah, let's do this.
So we actually pick up from Susato's point of view, having reached home at the end of the last game. So her father is apparently ill, and she's come home to see what's going on about that. And it turns out he's not actually ill, and there's a whole reason that he called her back. But the first case of the game is very much like the first case of the last game. It's a tutorial case set in Japan, the only case of the game set in Japan. But you actually play as Susato disguised as Ryunosuke's cousin Ryutaro Naruhodo.
I really love that that choice, honestly, because it's actually kind of showing how Shu Takumi and the rest of the writers of this game, they took a couple of risks with how they let things play out here, and that first risk was actually finding a way to get Susato into Japanese court as a lawyer, and I mean. That's something that is an interesting way that they approached this game overall. They took risks, and I like that.
Yeah, I think it was actually really nice because Susato, let's be real, through some of those early cases, I mean, she sort of carried things for us.
Oh, absolutely.
I sometimes wondered if she shouldn't have been the judicial assistant, but the actual lawyer. But then Ryunosuke comes into his own, and we'll get to that here in a minute. But we show that Susato is just as capable. I mean, she has those jitters, which is what they use to kind of explain the introductory nature of the case. But she quickly finds her groove. And there's this really interesting dynamic because, in the courts of Japan, women aren't allowed in the courtroom. So, she has to disguise herself. And it's once again against Auchi. He's the prosecutor for this case. And the victim of the case, oddly enough, is the culprit of the first case from Great Ace Attorney Adventures. Jezael Brett.
Jezael Brett. Oh, or that bitch.
Asa Shin, the assassin.
Oh, never change, Ace Attorney. Never change.
It's almost as subtle as Dade Man.
Almost. Or peace, love, and understanding.
and the defendant in this case is Ray Mimbami.
Remember me.
Yeah. who is a bi icon because she is, explicitly attracted to Susato, both in her Ryutaro persona before she realizes it's Susato and after.
Oh yeah, she's like, but you're so gallant and dashing. It's like no. She's totally falling head over heels for Susato there.
Yeah,
for Ryutaro, I guess. I don't know. Both. Oh yeah, both.
Well, but what did you think about this case, Beau?
I really like I said, I like the risk that they took with finding a way to make Susato the actual lawyer here. And I also like how they tied it into the first case of the previous game with Jezael Brett. And Mini Momo is actually a pretty interesting defendant, in his own right.
If I had a nickel for every time that we had an annoying reporter character in Ace Attorney, I mean, I'd only have 2 nickels, but it's weird that it happened twice.
Oh, what? You can't, you're not down with the Bushell? You're not down with him?
I am not down with the
You're not down with old Bushell? No, come on, man. My man was awesome, though. He was friends with the Grammarys. Come on now.
Mini Memo is slightly less annoying, but much more villainous. That even
definitely, yeah.
Even he sort of has a motivation. I mean, he felt that like Josiah Britt had actually like evaded justice because essentially they were just going to cover it up. She was going to go back to Britain and nothing was going to happen to her because, well, considering the revelations of the game and what her role played, I mean, we know nothing would have happened to her.
Oh yeah, of course. She just would have continued doing what she was doing.
She was on orders of the chief justice, or what is his actual position?
Lord Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, no,
I believe.
That is what they call him. Okay.
Yeah.
I played this again a couple months ago, so.
Yeah, I got you.
yeah. So under the orders of Strongguard himself, essentially tantamount to the orders of the British government. So nothing was going to happen to her, and I think Mini Memo had some inclinations of that, and so he was kind of onto something. It's one of those cases where when you replay it, which I did recently, you can kind of pick up on a few things. Once it's revealed that he's the culprit and that he wanted to kill her because he felt that she evaded justice, but he actually starts to kind of talk about some of the shit that comes up later.
Yeah, especially when it comes to what was on that music disc at the end of the first game and everything, and the names that are coming up. There,
Yep.
Yep. So I mean, he already knows that much. So. I mean, once we start to put two and two together there, we're just like, oh, no, this is going to lead to something calamitous, I guess you could say.
Yeah, exactly. So we're already sort of seeding the events, of the overarching narrative here. And this game, like the last game, is very much driven by an overarching narrative. The most standalone case in this game, again, is the Soseki case. But even that one has some implications, and Soseki reappears in this first trial as well.
Oh man, I love Soseki so much. He's so great. And as an aside, I do like near the end where he's back in Japanese court with Raymond Bami. Fucking what was he? They were representing Hosonaga. And he has like 10 cats on him or something like that. Yeah. It's like, hell yeah. I love it.
Yeah, it was kind of fun to see him again before we get another case involving him.
Yeah, and I love in the first case about how he's already this big time literary star, so he has kind of let it go to his head a little bit, but
he's also, back in Japan too, so you can tell he's a lot more comfortable. So
yeah, he's a lot more comfortable in his own skin, in his own country and everything. So yeah, he's not nearly as miserable as he was, but you do kind of see as his testimony goes on, you do see the old Soseki eventually kind of break through a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, just due to the implications alone. With this case. And again, we have Takatsuchi Auchi in the prosecutor's bench, the ancestor of the Pains. And this time, he's already been humiliated in the last trial by Ryunosuke. So this is sort of revenge for him. And I like how he has this little sprig of his top knot left.
Yeah, he has a little bit of a sprig of hair, which is the hope of the Auchi clan, just kind of springing up on the top of his head. I think that's how he put it anyway.
Yes. I also like how his hair is actually similar to his character or Winston Payne's character design in Apollo Justice Ace Attorney.
Yeah, you're right. It is. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. And then at the very end, that scene where he pulls out a blade and you think he's gonna like commit seppuku or something, and he just cuts off the little sprig of hair on his head, and they all pray.
Yeah, right. It's all just they pray for his honor and whatnot. It's like, yeah, that's fucking great.
I was
That's hilarious.
dying, dude. That was like the music stops. All the characters just like look a little solemn for a second.
Yeah, they all give him due respect. It's hilarious.
This was his second humiliation at the hands of a Naruhodō, and this one a country bumpkin, no less. As he eloquently puts.
Country bumpkins.
Yeah. But as a tutorial case, I think it works well enough. It interestingly enough does assume that the player might be new to the franchise and be playing this for the first time, but I don't recommend playing this game as your first Ace Attorney game because it does, a lot of the plot elements do heavily rely on the last one. So
yeah, definitely.
But I mean, hey, if it's been a while since you've played Ace Attorney, there's a short little tutorial. It's a little bit more challenging than the last one, I would say. But
you really think so? I didn't find it all that challenging.
Not challenging, but a little bit more, maybe.
I don't know. I think that it was about on par with the first case of the first Great Ace Attorney game. So I don't know. Maybe so.
And Mikotoba serves as your co-counsel this time, which is cool.
That was cool. Yeah,
we get the father-daughter pairing, and then at the end we get a Ryutaro takedown with Ryutaro and Ray literally throwing Many Mem across the courtroom.
Just yeeting him across the courtroom, like right into the back of the crowd and everything. It's amazing.
Yeah, I love that. Like that's one of the other better moments of this game. That's just very memorable. Sticks out to me. And then, of course, that actually leads us into the second case because they begin discussing, the details that Susato had given Eugene that made him take her home.
Yeah.
And so, and like fake his illness or whatever. And those are the events of Soseki's second case, the memoirs of the Clouded Kokoro. So again, what they do is they take what was once a small scene in that previous case and expanded it into a full one. So we have Mr. Shamspear as the victim in this case. Again, not an actual murder.
He should have died. He absolutely should have died.
He should have.
He should have, motherfucker.
He's so insufferable. But what makes this so damning for Soseki is that because he's a surviving victim, and unlike Miss Olive Green, who was comatose, he's awake and alive, and he can tell a story, and he actually is claiming that Soseki did it. So,
man, they just keep doing Soseki so wrong.
My man, I know.
Damn.
God damn it.
I know, he cannot catch a break, man.
Yeah, and Homie was trying to go home. That's the thing. This happens literally the day after he is acquitted. He gets involved in this other case, which
he can't even catch a break. Like after almost having his freedom taken away and everything, now he's like right back in the same scenario. It's like, man, it's
God
like
damn it,
Soseki, damn it, man.
And nobody's easy on him because he's already been convicted before, so there's already kind of this coloring towards him. Maybe even some questions in some people's minds and the jurors and the other member in the court, of whether or not he was actually not guilty in the last case. So there are some additional implications. Again, this is the one case that's not going to have as far-reaching consequences on the overarching narrative. This is going to be your filler case, so to speak. And some might argue, again, the weakest case of this game, but I really jive with Soseki. I think he's a lot of fun, and just like these series of unfortunate mishaps involving him. Because again, this wasn't supposed to happen, and it did.
Yeah, man. No, anytime you get Soseki in this game, it's always just magical to me. Especially when he becomes alliterative and everything. It's like he's so expressive.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I can kind of see why people would think that this case is the weakest of this, probably of both of these games. It's I mean, there is, of course, the flashback narrative device that's used here, and of course, Shamspear doesn't really help things. You know, he is the most insufferable character in this entire duology, like without a doubt.
Yeah. So the victim in this case is actually essentially the culprit. Like that's what's kind of interesting.
Yeah, once again, a different little risk that they took there, you know?
Well, he's not the culprit of his own case. The actual culprit is the victim of the previous case, Olive Green.
Yeah, that's another interesting thing. Is like, yeah, it ties into to the previous case with the Garadebs and everything. We even get old man Garadeb back in this case as well.
Yeah, not as a juror, though.
No, not as a juror, which was, I mean, that was jarring in its own right. It's just like, what are you doing here, Garadeb? What are you doing here? But and he's actually one of my favorite minor characters in these two games, because I mean, he's just a straight up proper bally British gentleman, you know, served in the military, did his time. And he just wanted to settle down with his wife, but he couldn't even do that.
Oh, that old bally thing, I don't like to talk about it.
That old bally thing, I don't like to talk about it.
And we mentioned in the last episode that at the end of the day, like his marriage with Joan was just kind of endearing. You know, like they're this old married couple that are, exists as a juxtaposition of a younger, happier couple, and yet they still have their moment at the end of the day. So I'm happy to see the Garadebs come back, of course. Well, I don't think Joan is actually in this case at all.
No, Joan's still in prison, serving her time for what she did. Yeah.
And, fortunately for us, I think John isn't actually involved in the case proper, but all the other jurors actually are here, which was interesting. They brought the exact same jurors from the previous case.
You're right, they did.
For a separate crime, which, when you think about it, is actually kind of weird, but...
Yeah. I mean, we did kind of see a few of the same old jurors here. Yeah.
They're all the same jurors as the first Suseki case, except for they replaced Joan with John in the first case, so that already had a change. And then now it's Mrs. Altamont.
Yeah, Miss Altamont, the gas baron. Yeah. And honestly, I kind of like how in this game they really start to incorporate members of the jury into these stories proper a little more, which in the next case we'll get into, I think it's like a few cases down we get into that a little bit. But, I mean, yeah, it was actually kind of interesting to see someone from the jury... someone from the jury actually give some testimony and everything. Like that was interesting.
Yeah. This is a fun case. I don't have any complaints about it, even if it is arguably the weakest case of the game, because we can't really fault the tutorial case for not being, as complex as the later ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the memoirs of the Clouded Kokoro again, I think is a lot of fun. And just seeing all this fucking shit that happens to Soseki. And then they managed to tie it into the overall narrative with this escaped convict who hid a treasure, which has a B for the Baskervilles. And so that actually ties into the plot later once we get into the professor killings.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And I mean, it's like at first when you're going through this case, you're like, okay, so how does this have any real bearing over whether Susato was going to stay in Japan or not? But then when you actually see this dog collar with a bunch of blood on it and a big ass B on the logo and everything, it's like, oh, okay. Now we're starting to kind of get somewhere with that.
Yeah, and getting into the plot of the as yet unpublished Hound of the Baskervilles story, and we actually finally get some resolution on that. The whole deal with that was that Susato glanced at the story in her father's study, and that's how she knows about it.
But what's interesting is that that's that first little clue that Mikotoba might actually be connected to Herlock Sholmes.
Yes.
Like early on. So, I mean, I'm going to tell you the truth. I didn't really catch that right away.
No, yeah, it's not obvious, but it's one of those things that you look back on like a replay and you're like, oh, okay, I see how this all connects. This is pretty cool. But moving on to the third case, this is the Adventure of the Great Departure. This one is really interesting. One thing I noticed right off the bat, in Ryunosuke's first case, the case with Soseki, he's a lot more competent than he was. Even in the case, the trial that ended on the previous day, I've already noticing that there aren't as many like flaws in his arguments. He's able to present himself well, but once he get into the Adventure of the Great Departure, there's a point early on in the trial where Van Zieks is at a loss for a rebuttal. Ryunosuke has almost conclusively proven his client's innocence, and you know who it is that throws a monkey wrench into the thing, into the case?
It fucking Hairbrain himself.
It's like,
there were moments where I'm just like, dude, shut the fuck up. I'm trying to fucking save your life.
But
I'm like, dude, come on.
One thing I noticed, especially on replay, is that Ryunosuke has completely come into his element here. He makes a flawless argument. I mean, he is just perfect. He doesn't have a single issue with the argument that he's presenting. I feel like Ryunosuke in this game reaches heights, reaches a level of competence higher than arguably we see Phoenix himself do.
Oh, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I mean, it's because it really shows his natural talent for the law and everything, I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, his argument and the way that you actually coax that argument into being something that's actually accepted and actually almost gets Hairbrain a not guilty verdict. I mean, yeah, no, that was actually really, really interesting, and it was really interesting to play through it as well.
Yeah, 100%. So what's also really cool about this case is that we have Hairbrain, who is sometimes at odds with his own innocence, because what Hairbrain wants more than anything, at least at the beginning of this case, is to prove his thesis right. We're actually starting off with the mystery of a body that has supposedly teleported, something that should be impossible, actually even in modern times, so especially so in Victorian London. And that's the premise that the case is built upon, is that this experiment went awry, where a body actually successfully teleported, apparently. The prosecution actually pursues that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, Van Zieks is like, look, the premise of our case is that this actually happened. Asman was actually teleported. He was just teleported higher than his target, and that's what led to his death.
Yes. Yeah, it's actually a pretty interesting case just from the outset, because we've got it's kind of similar to another case, Turnabout Time Traveler, which was the DLC case of Spirit of Justice, where we're presented with this premise that, supposedly time travel actually occurred. But, we realize as players, even Ace Attorney, even in the Ace Attorney universe, that's a little wacky. And we feel the same way about teleportation in this case. Like,
So we could talk to spirits in the Ace Attorney verse, but we can't time travel?
We can't time travel, and we can't teleport. That is outside of the realm of possibility.
But spirit channeling, yeah, totally real thing.
But I can kind of see where they're going with that. Just because spirit channeling exists doesn't mean that humans have the technology to travel through time or through space.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. But I mean, I just find that kind of funny. But also, it's like the best thing about this duology is how grounded it is compared to the rest of the Ace Attorney franchise.
Yeah, something we mentioned in the previous episode is that there aren't actually any supernatural elements in the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. Instead, what we get is some occasionally technology that's much ahead of its time.
It's more about about the advances of science and technology than anything, you know, and you really do want Hairbrain to be able to. You're kind of rooting for him a little bit, even though he's really frustrating as a defendant. But even so, it's like you do want him to kind of be right, maybe, but. Unfortunately, him being right about his hypothesis and everything would pretty much throw him in prison, possibly in his life. So, I mean, he even would much rather be branded a murderer than have his hypothesis disproven.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess it's a matter of pride for him or something like that. But I mean.
Well, and that also has an interesting implication for Baron von Zeke's position, because at no point during the trial does he ever concede that the teleportation didn't happen up until the very end, right? Ryunosuke makes note of that, you know, is that this is Van Zeke's friend. And in a way, he's doing what he can to help his friend. He's doing what, you know, the client, I mean, Ryunosuke actually goes against the client's wishes at a certain point during the trial. Ryunosuke realizes that finding the truth is the most important thing, and protecting the professor's hypothesis, despite that being his client's wishes, is not, you know, what he's going to endeavor to do. But, you know, as a sort of foil to that, Barrack is willing to do that no matter what, you know, at the risk of his own credibility as a prosecutor, right?
Yeah, oh no, absolutely. I mean,
in a way, him prosecuting the case is him showing love for his friend. And, you know, he mentions that. He's like, I wouldn't entrust this task to any other prosecutor. And towards the end of the case, he wouldn't entrust this to any other lawyer either.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's really about Hairbrain just kind of, you know, kind of learning to really put his trust in other people, you know, in spite of what that might mean for his hypothesis, you know? Yeah. I mean, at the end, I guess the Hairbrain, the human, as opposed to the scientist, comes out in the end a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So we get a little bit more of that dynamic, you know, with a close personal friend of Van Zeke's. But we also get a development in the relationship. I think this is kind of the turning point in the relationship between Van Zeke's and Naruhodō, because it's at this point where Barrack has to admit that Ryunosuke is a man of integrity, that he's a lawyer worth his salt, and that together they realize that they can always find the truth. It's why, you know, in this case, he actually wants Ryunosuke on the other end of the bench, because he realizes that together they're going to be able to pursue the truth despite his prejudices.
Absolutely. And it's inspiring to see that, you know. I mean, it shows that even in spite of his prejudices and everything, I mean, Von Zeeks is still a man of honor and integrity, and he's still going to, and if he sees that in someone else, he's going to concede that.
Yeah.
You know?
And ironically enough, there's something almost a little bit more respectable in the way that Van Zeeks attacks Naruhodō than other prosecutors. Other prosecutors are sometimes quick to make an attack on character, but other than his blatant racism, Van Zeeks does appear to mostly attack the credibility of Ryunosuke's argument. There's a sort of gentlemanly disposition underneath the blatant racism.
Absolutely. I mean, much has been said about about his racism, and you know, I mean, at the end of the day, this is the 1800s we're talking about and everything, but I mean, eventually it does kind of get explained a little more here in these next couple of cases. We start to really see why he has that kind of animosity.
Yeah,
a little bit.
We'll get into that, because I there's a big talking point I want to make about that. But what I thought was interesting about the dynamic between these two, again, is that Ryunosuke has actually demonstrated his competence as a lawyer and his integrity of character to Van Zeeks at this point. And so they really play off each other best here. I mean, this is the final case that they take on opposite ends of the courtroom, right?
It is. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, the next couple of cases, Naruhodō is actually representing Van Zeeks.
Yeah. But this case is actually one of the better in the game, if not the best case of the game. I mean, I also kind of have a soft spot for the final case, despite what some might consider issues. But for a lot of people, this is the strongest case, and it's definitely a contender for me. Just because of how complex it is. And again, it actually does end up tying into the overarching narrative because we do have the character of Enoch Drebber, who was the witness of the professor coming back to life.
Yeah, exactly.
Enoch Drebber is thought for quite some time, actually pretty early on, to be the actual culprit of this case. And he is involved in the machinations of it, although he's not the one that ultimately kills the victim, Mr. Odiasman. That was something else that was interesting, too, was that the victim in this case was someone who was, not necessarily such a great person, right?
Well, I mean, we've already represented somebody like that in Magnus McGilded, to be fair, but
this time it's the victim.
I mean, yeah. But this time, he's the victim, and I mean, and he kind of gets what he deserves, I think. Because in the end, I mean, he gets he's ultimately killed by Scythe, Dr. Scythe, who is herself a very compelling character.
She was the coroner behind the professor case, which is this big kind of DL6 case that they built up in this game.
Yeah, and that's really a big part of this particular case is really starting to kind of make that build up towards the whole final case, involving Van Zeeks and involving, the whole thing with the professor case and all that, This is where we really start to kind of get that really heavy build up towards that. And I really like the way that they went about it here, especially with the investigations, which I think that these are some of the best investigation phases in the game, probably next to the second case of the first game, because it's a little more, it feels a little more involved this time around. You know what I mean?
Yeah, especially everywhere you go. The Great Exhibition where this crime occurred, and the Waxwork Museum with Madame Tuspel. She's an interesting character.
Oh, she's amazing, and she's the only one that I ship with Herlock Sholmes. I ship her with Herlock Sholmes 100%.
Fuck yeah.
She's the only woman that makes sense for him.
Honestly, yeah. Madame Tuspel is really, really cool, and she knows more than she's letting on. At this point, we know that Herlock knows more than he's letting on. There's this whole professor case that's being built up proper, and we're trying to figure out how this is all even related to the case at hand, and it is. It's all inextricably linked, down to using the Waxworth of the professor as the body double to complete the trick of teleportation.
Yeah, it's almost like on Drebber's part, it was maybe a little too on the nose, maybe.
Yeah,
on Drebber and on Scythe's part even.
You got to think about it too. Yeah, you do have to wonder about the character motivations here, because it's like, okay, so you're trying to cover this thing up. So yeah, let's use the waxwork model of the professor here, and
yeah, only the most famous murderer in British history up to that point.
Oh, but wasn't that part of the whole thing too? Wasn't Drebber sort of blackmailing her with that or something?
Yeah, Drebber was. I think Drebber was blackmailing her, and she was also being blackmailed by Asmund as well.
Yeah,
she was kind of getting fucked over twice that way.
It is such a complex case. It really is.
Hell, at one point, there's another bomb that goes off and destroys the fucking contraption that's at the center of all of this. It's there's twists and turns everywhere in this case.
Yeah, I mean, even at the point where you think that you've found the culprit, Drebber, and you're ready to kind of leave it at that. But no, there's more. There's something still tugging here in that Ace Attorney fashion, even though everything worked out about the case seems to have been resolved. There's just something nagging left behind. And, and we get one of those really cool pursuit moments with Courtney Scythe I actually have it saved on my Switch because I feel like it was one of the better uses of the pursuit theme and everything. Like, and this game actually adds a prelude to pursuit theme. So every case kind of has this sort of like build up to the pursuit moment that works with the music, and then you'll like deliver that one piece of evidence, and then it just goes full on, you know.
Oh man, yeah, no, that gets me fully hyped up, man. I mean, that's what I love about all these pursuit themes in Ace Attorney, but especially in this game. You know, they're being more symphonic and everything. I mean, it's got a little more drive to it. You know, it's got a little more humanity even.
Yeah.
You know, and this right here, it's like you're pumped up. You're just like, yeah, okay, now it's time to present this bit of evidence. It's like, and then it's like, yeah, we got her, you know, and for some reason, the pursuit music in this game and in the game before it, I mean, I don't know, it hits a little differently for me than the other pursuit themes in the other games.
I think it might be my favorite pursuit. Well, it's up there with Pursuit Cornered from Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, the first game. Like, both of those to me are just really sublime. Like, they just really hit that charge, you know, like that emotional moment where you're just taking down the culprit. And as I mentioned in the previous review, Great Ace Attorney 1 holds off its pursuit theme for the final case. But we actually open up here, and what they've done is also introduce a prelude to pursuit theme that really works and actually building that up. I mean, it's actually kind of remarkable how much of a difference that makes, just making a little change like that.
Hell, I mean, even Susato gets her own prelude and full-on pursuit themes in the first case.
She gets her own objection theme. Yeah.
Yeah, she gets her own objection theme and everything. So, I mean, yeah, it's really cool how they really utilized music in this series to, you know, really like undercut the narrative tone of the game overall.
Yeah. That was one thing that they introduced in the last game too, was a prelude to objection theme, and so they give Susato her own objection and prelude to objection theme as well, and I think that's a change that should roll forward into Ace Attorney 7 or the next Ace Attorney release. Like,
absolutely, yeah.
Along with some of the other technical improvements, as previously mentioned, like, you know, just having multiple characters in a scene to be able to click on and talk to. Again, that seems very simple on the surface, but it adds a lot of depth into the case, you know, just to kind of see Hurley hanging in the back room somewhere, you know?
Yeah, I know, right? There's Hurley just inexplicably just kind of standing still and everything. You're just like, Hurley, what are you doing? And then he's just like, oh, hello, fellows. It's like, I happen to be a model in this wax museum. It's like, yeah, that's cool.
he's just there, like you're just looking around the waxwork museum in this case, and
then there he is, and it's just like, oh, that's interesting.
Like for a second you're like, wait, is that a waxwork of him? And then you look at it and you're like, no, it's actually him, and he's pretending to be a waxworth.
And then it's all because Madame Tuspel pretty much has him around her little finger, you know, like completely.
Yeah, she's got him by the balls.
Like straight up threatens him with a vat of melted wax. It's like, goddamn, girl, shit.
She shows up in the courtroom later as a witness, and that kind of explains Enoch Drebber's whole backstory. And then we're also laying the foundation for some further revelations here. But right now we're concerned with what this means for the case as a whole, and ultimately that culminates in this strange, complicated plot, you know, where Drebber masterminds something, and then Courtney Scythe has an opportunity to kind of take control, and she ends up murdering the victim, and it's really quite delicious. This is some of the best that Ace Attorney has to offer right here.
Absolutely, man. I mean, yeah, I have no complaint with it at all. And like I said, the investigation scenes are the best in the game, and we also get quite possibly either the best or the second best dance of deduction throughout the whole game. The gravity bomb that we talked about earlier.
This one's my personal favorite. I mean, the final dance of deduction one is super great. It's cinematic, but I did feel like that one was a little bit easier. This one was just cool just based on the whole like fantasy of it and just how invested Sholmes is in this fantasy. And
I know. He needs. It's like he needs this to be a gravity device. He needs that.
Yeah, it's great. And then ultimately, this case results in one of the biggest plot revelations, two at once actually. That the professor, this horrible mass murderer that's been hinted about, multiple times throughout this case, and I think it might have even been mentioned in the first game. But I can't quite remember if they'd even talked about the professor yet. But I know it's inextricably linked to Van Zieks' character arc, which starts getting built up in the first game. But we get the revelation that the professor is Kazuma Asogi's father, Genshin Asogi, and then we get the revelation that Ryunosuke and Susato had explicitly were suspicious of it before, but we get the full-on confirmation that Kazuma is alive and he's Van Zieks' apprentice.
Yeah, interesting revelations all around, and I really like the way that it was actually presented, as an in-game cutscene, and, in the Old Bailey and everything, and it makes for a good set piece for this whole reveal. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. When he unlocked that mask and I realized that the man was Japanese, I'm just like, oh, okay. No wonder they wanted to keep this under wraps.
Yeah.
And then Kazuma freaks out. He's just like, father, and I'm just like, oh, okay. Now things are getting dicey.
Yes. Yeah, and this is right at the conclusion of the case. What's really cool here too is that Van Zieks himself is the one that is giving this information to Naruhodō willingly. Information that is classified, top secret. But I guess, Van Zieks, in his role as a well-respected prosecutor of the Old Bailey, is at liberty to divulge, and the prosecutor of that case. So,
yeah.
Yeah, it is quite the revelation, and we finally start to get some answers, Oh, okay, so is this why Van Zieks is racist?
Exactly. And, it's not the exact reason why. We learn later what actually happened, but, the way that this sets up so many story notes for so many character arcs here, for Migatoba's character arc, for Van Zieks' character arc, for Naruhodō and Kazuma's arc as friends and everything. I mean, the implications of it are really, really heavy, and it was an interesting story beat, and I was into it, man. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I was really into it.
I'm gonna say this is easily the best case 3 of any Ace Attorney game, because there's the notorious nature of case 3s, but this is easily the best of any game's third case. It does not have any kind of case 3 syndrome. Several things happen plot wise in this story. I mean, it's the return to the present. We get to see Naruhodō retake up his position as defense attorney 6 months after his suspension as a result of the events of the conclusion of the last game. We get the return of Susato from Japan right when we need her the most. We get, the plot revelations revolving the professor, that Kazuma's alive. Beric Van Zieks is actually beginning to show some sort of respect for Naruhodō and take him seriously. We start getting, we get introduced properly to the professor case. We get more information about the circumstances surrounding the Reaper of the Bailey. So many things happen here, and it's all done well. This case manages to juggle all of those things.
Yeah, I mean, it's a heavy case to get into. I mean, it's almost. It's almost like the DLC case from the first game and everything. I mean, yeah, it's kind of complex in that way.
Yeah.
When the trial reached its conclusion earlier, I thought to myself, yes, it's time. Time for you to come face to face with this hideous... I borrowed the key for the mask from the proprietress of the Waxwork Museum. So see for yourselves now. Confirm it with your own eyes. The truth that's been hidden this past decade.
That's the professor?
Yes, that's him.
Until now, the thought never even crossed my mind. That the mass murderer, whose crimes shook Britain as never before, was Japanese.
Wait a minute. That face. I feel as though I've seen it somewhere. It's strangely familiar.
Father.
What? Father? Kazuma! My best friend, Kazuma Asogi. After a whole year, finally his memories returned. As he stood there before me, Ryunosuke. Hello again. My friend.
Kazuma-sama!
Judicial Assistant Mikotoba.
It's been a very long road. Thank you. Thank you for guiding my friend here when I could not.
It was an honor.
I knew you wouldn't die that easily, Kazuma.
I owe you thanks, too, for taking good care of that in my absence.
Oh. Karuma, the great blade of the Asogi clan, passed down through the generations. When we left Japan, this sword was at my friend's side. The Japanese man's katana is his soul, and he couldn't be parted from it. But then, when the incident happened, it was Susato-san's wish that I inherit the sword, and I've kept it with me ever since, along with my memories of the friendship we shared. With this by my side, I always felt that you were watching over me somehow.
I've made it. At last.
Father. Are you saying... Surely not. You mean, you knew all this time? I'm looking at it. But... I still can't believe it. This mass murderer is Kazuma's father.
Kazuma-sama.
Ryunosuke, we have much to talk about, but now is not the time. I'll be seeing you.
That's all Kazuma said. Before he turned and left us there, in the courtroom.
And it's a proper segue into the events of the next case, Twisted Karma and His Last Bow, which is also the same case, really, as the final one, which is the resolve of Ryunosuke Naruhodo.
Yeah, I mean, we may as well just treat these two cases as just one large overarching case, honestly. I mean, it's the only way to really tackle it, I think.
Yeah, I think really the only separation here is that the prior case is more concerned with the murder of Tobias Gregson, whereas the latter case is more concerned with the identity of the Reaper of the Bailey and the truth of the Professor killings.
Yeah, first off, Gregson, we hardly knew ye, man.
I know. And then we get some unfortunate, character implications because we find out that he was sort of the head of the Reaper. So we mourn his loss right away because, we'd kind of grown to love Gregsy. And then we find out that, actually he was involved in some shit.
Yeah, he was. And I mean, once again, this is another one of those risks that they took with the writing of this game. Was that like actually killing off a much beloved character? Honestly, I mean, I find Gregson to be the most relatable, mainly because he's the closest in age to me. I mean, I'm 42. He was 45 in this game, so it's like that kind of cuts deep a little bit for me. It's like, I mean. It's like, no, Gregsy, why?
Yeah. And at the end of
the
day, I still love him. I still think he was a good man.
No, he was. No. I'm not going to sit here and act like Gregson was actually malicious. And it's very well, near the end of these cases, I think it's pretty well established that most everybody involved was coerced. Into it, So, I mean, no, I'm not going to sit here and act like Gregson was a piece of shit for this or anything. I mean, Jenny Lestrade was right to be upset about how they were talking about him, really. I mean, I'm on her side.
That's one thing we didn't talk about in the last case is we get reintroduced to Jenny Lestrade, who is in a proper role as the Detective Inspector Lestrade. Well, she calls herself that. She's more of like a rookie in training apprentice.
Yeah.
But Gregson takes her under his wing, and so she actually starts to fulfill the role. So if anybody was curious about why Lestrade wasn't a detective in the last game, this sort of answers that. So here we get this this relationship between her and Gregson that's really endearing. Yeah, I wish we had actually got to see more of it.
Yeah, man, he kind of saves her ass a little bit, I mean, she didn't really have a whole lot of a path forward for her life, and Gregson gave her that. And she really shows an aptitude for police work as well. So, I mean, we start to get the first little foundation of a decent Inspector Lestrade here. So yeah, and it's also a convincing way in how she actually becomes a police inspector as well.
That's what, Mr. Naruhodō?
Exactly. Mr. Naruhodō.
Mr. Naru, with her clear Cockney accent.
Oh, no, she's total Cockney.
I like how...
Oh, I'm a Cockney.
We mentioned this, I think, in the previous review, but I like how well the localized text conveys accents.
Oh, extremely well, yeah.
Because we got characters like McGilded, who's obviously Irish, and we get Gina, who's got this Cockney accent. And, it's kind of cool. Like, you can take characters like Mr. Garrideb or Detective Gregson, and what they sound like without even having to hear any voiced lines from them. You know exactly what they sound like.
Or even De Rossi and De Rosso. It's like, I mean...
Capo.
Yeah, Capo.
That's right.
It's
we
like
get our Italian representation.
We get Italian representation. Hell yeah. The Italians and the French. You know what? Damn it, I like them too. They're kind of the Skulkins of this game.
Very much the Skulkins of this case.
They're the Skulkin analogs here.
The redheaded league, which Sholmes gets involved in. I love that scene where you just pop in at the beginning of this case and he has red hair.
He just has red hair, and I mean, you know that he's expecting somebody to say something about it, but you just kind of ignore it.
They ignore it for so long.
You ignore it for so long because it's just so blatant. But I mean, also I love how that's tying into Sherlock Holmes canon. The Red-Headed League is one of his more well-known stories, especially in the original run of Sherlock Holmes. So, I mean, having the Red-Headed League make an appearance here, it's like that's actually a cool little literary reference.
Hey, Capo, I'm eating the spaghetti.
Hey, Capo, I'm eating the spaghetti.
No.
my man De Rossi.
Do not call me that. I do not wish to be called the Capo.
I do not wish to be called the Capo. And I love that their last names, of course, are Italian and French for red as well.
Yeah.
That's also great.
Ace Attorney is never very subtle, but
no, not at all.
That's what we love about it.
Well, of course, man. I mean, hell, we also get the character like Seishiro Jikoku, and if I remember correctly, Jikoku is Japanese for hell, right?
Yeah, that means hell. There's an interesting revelation with him in these pair of cases because he comes off, especially when we see him at the beginning of Twisted Karma and his last bow, is this very jovial figure. I mean, we saw him in the courtroom before. We get a little hint of his personality in The Adventure of the Blossoming Attorney. And then here, you honestly kind of like him at first.
No, he's incredibly likable, and also I love once again another risk that they took with the narrative here, taking the judge from the first cases of these two games and making him not only a central character of this case, but also the actual culprit behind Gregson's murder.
Yeah. I thought that was really cool. I mean, even just bumping into him in the preliminary stages of the case, and then finding him later, on board the steamship, and then, kind of tearing him down, wondering if, how involved he is in the murder of things. And then we find out he is the actual culprit in the initial case.
Yep. And of course, his involvement is what kind of, it's what kind of brings upon strong hearts, fall a little bit.
Yep. But what was interesting about Twisted Karma and his last bow for me is that it does something similar to the previous case, The Adventure of the Great Departure, where it starts with a seemingly unrelated case, and then when you least expect it, weaves it into the plot of the existing case, while we're getting in this instance greater revelations about earlier things, about the professor killings and whatnot. So there's just a lot going on here. But what was really cool is that you start out with this, disappearance of Daily Vigil. You get to a point in the case where you almost kind of forget about that plot, even though that's where you started. And then it all sort of comes to a head and comes together. And that's what's really brilliant.
I do like with the Vigils how Evie Vigil, she's a previous juror herself, and she actually gets a little bit of a character here.
Yeah, They bring back a lot of characters like that. I thought that was cool. Even one of the jurors from one of the earlier cases shows up, I think, in the Waxwork Museum or something. Like, and you were just like,
no, yeah, you're right. The old cop, yeah.
Well, there's the old cop who shows up as a juror later, and then there's also the banker, I think, in the very first case.
That's right. That banker character.
Who's just inexplicably in the Waxwork Museum. Like, okay.
It's like, all right then.
Yeah. I thought that was cool. We get the return of Beppo, too.
Oh, good old Beppo.
That man.
Poor Beppo. Oh, man. It's like yeah, now he's just a beggar just out on Fresno Street. Just
if Soseki can't catch a break, then Beppo has never caught a break in his whole life.
No, not once, man. Poor guy, dude. I mean, he was getting completely jacked over by the goddamn Coachman's Guild. I mean, with his fees and everything, and now he's just out on the street. It's like, man. So somebody help Beppo out.
Yeah, but we get the disappearance of Daily Vigil, which becomes inextricably linked with the case at hand, the murder of Tobias Gregson, and then Mr. Vigil has an inextricable connection to the Professor case. And so, yeah, all this stuff is happening, and honestly, like, the way that it unfolds is just brilliant.
Yeah.
Like, I like, and then we get introduced to the warden too while this is happening, Mr. Caden. Another accent that she just immediately pick up on, right?
Oh man, no, I already was Scottish accent, you know, like, I mean, it was pretty hardcore, man. I like it.
Can I tell you that?
I cannot tell you that. I don't know. My Scottish accent kind of sucks right now, but I mean, yeah, no, he's an interesting. He has an interesting accent. Yeah.
Again, another character who obviously knows more than he's letting on. I like how
way more. Yeah.
Homeboy conveniently has the will of Genshin Asogi, you know, and never brought it up before that point.
It's like, this motherfucker, you know, it just goes to show you how, you know, corruption floats to the top, right? I mean, I mean, yeah, he was the one that actually precipitated the jailbreak, right?
Right. So there's this jailbreak, a cover-up, a man who, Genshin Asogi, the crime was pinned on in a closed court of the professor, because even the higher echelons of the judicial system, you know, needed to be in the dark about this. They pin the blame on him, but they're going to give him his freedom and let him return home to his son. And even that gets fucked up, because I think it's Jigoku who shoots him, right?
Yeah, it's Jigoku that shoots him. So yeah, Jigoku has already killed one man, and now he's killed another. It's like he's bloodthirsty.
Yep. And Ace Attorney throws those curveballs at us. Okay, so the professor is Kazuma's father. Oh, wait, it's actually not. It's Beric Van Zeek's brother.
Oh, man, that was a hell of a revelation. And I do like the way that you actually come to that conclusion. Like, mainly just the subtle thing with the red ink versus the blue ink. And then you think, oh, wait a second. What does Clint's autopsy say? Something about scarlet ink on his fingers? You know?
Yeah. It's the truth that nobody's able to come to except Ryunosuke. Even Kazuma, who is become a completely different character in this case, hadn't realized.
I mean, he's driven. He's completely driven. He wants blood for what happened to his dad, and rightfully so. His dad got screwed over big time.
Well, what's cool about Kazuma is we get the sort of like twisted, dark version of his theme from the first game, which was filled with hope. You know, he was this idyllic character who died too young and never got to realize his dream. And then we realized that there was this sort of darkness underneath. You know, there was an underlying motivation, which I think he was willing to tell Ryunosuke up before he died, but just never got a chance to. And then we just see him driven to the edge of madness.
And then you find out that the entire reason that he was even going to Great Britain was because of this assassin exchange and everything. It's like,
right.
It really makes you question what you actually saw in that first case in the first game. You know, I mean, he's very. I mean, he's definitely a better lawyer than you at that point, but I mean, you really get the idea that, you know, he has this unwavering sense of justice and loyalty to his friends, but here he's really consumed by what's happened with his dad and everything, to a point where, I mean, he just doesn't see the forest for the trees, like, especially when the actual truth of what happened here is starting to stare him right in the fucking face, you know?
Yeah.
But, I mean, he's just so set on getting one over on the Reaper of the Bailey that, I mean, he doesn't want the truth. He just wants revenge, you know? And that's the point here. It's... You know, he's not going to get what he wants using the tactics that he's using.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
And it's so interesting because as a prosecutor, he's another character that also knows more than he's let on. In fact, he's involved in the events of this crime and doesn't disclose those facts until it becomes clear to the rest of the court, until Ryunosuke uncovers it. And even then, he can't see the full truth because he's consumed by vengeance. And Ryunosuke has to sort of pull him out of that and uncover the truth himself, that the actual professor, the serial killer of the aristocrats, none other than Clint Van Zieks himself, but he's not even the mastermind. No, the identity of the Reaper of the Bailey and the professor killings is none other than Lord Mel Strongheart himself. And I'm sure a lot of people could have seen that coming, but the revelation of it is still no less awesome.
Oh, man, I have to say that there's nothing more epic than seeing Strongheart up there in the Bailey as the judge, and you know he's using his cane as the gavel and everything, and it's just like, no, that's epic. And when you have that final takedown and you see the scales of justice finally tipped to the side of innocence, and then it comes down and it just pours out flames all over the Bailey. It's fucking intense, man. It's one of the most intense fucking final boss takedowns in this entire series, and one of the best breakdowns as well.
Yes, it really is. And I like how it starts as an homage to Damon Gant's breakdown with the clapping. Did you pick up on that?
Yeah, I saw that. It starts, ha 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 ha, and then he starts clapping harder and laughing harder. It's like, yeah, no, it had that nice little that nice little parallel.
Yeah, and again, he's the head of the legal force, and he's at the top of it all, and you've got to take him down. And so, I wasn't joking when I told you that Ryunosuke, in the course of these events, ends up dismantling the entire British judicial system.
You weren't wrong. No, it's like Male Strongheart is pretty much the entire judicial system. He's the head of the judiciary, second only to the Attorney General for the Queen herself.
He is the Senate.
He is the Senate, pretty much. He is the law.
It gets to a point where even uncovering the truth isn't enough. And that's why I'm kind of okay with this Deus Ex Machina, because Ryunosuke does everything that's within his power to do. He does all the legwork himself. It just comes down to the fact that there's no way to fucking pin this on him. There's no, everybody knows, but the judiciary, which is a closed court to begin with, is not willing to incriminate Lord Strongheart. And so that's where Sholmes comes in.
That's where Hurley comes in, and I love the way that they use him as kind of he's kind of a Deus Ex Machina in his own right, and he just so happens to be good enough in with the Queen to maybe more or less Iris to take audience with the Queen and get Strongheart struck down as the Lord Chief Justice, And of course you realize why Iris is able to do that, because it turns out she is of aristocratic blood, right?
Right. So it does sort of make sense, but this is where a lot of Ace Attorney fans were a little bit stretched on their suspension of disbelief on the level of technology. But again, consider this the analog to the mainline series supernatural elements. Okay, so
yeah. I mean, if we can have goddamn Dolly fucking inhabiting Maya for an entire case, we can have this happen.
We can have a holographic projection well ahead of its time.
Yes, we can have something like this happen. It's like, come on, people.
And video conferencing.
Yeah, right. That's exactly what it is, essentially.
Yeah, but I actually, again, I think it's a forgivable use of Deus Ex Machina because, I mean, again, you've done all the work yourself. You've uncovered the truth. It's just, Herlock is the one that comes in at the end and makes sure that this court gets its proper audience. That's what he does. Ryunosuke still uncovered the truth himself, and I feel like that's what matters. This is still I think this final case is sometimes criticized for the fact that Ryunosuke isn't the one that actually puts the final nail in the coffin. But I feel like if you feel that way, you're kind of looking at it wrong.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying.
It is Ryunosuke's talent and his drive to uncover the truth that brings these events to light. It's just making sure that there's the proper audience for that trial.
Yeah, and ultimately he did everything within his power to bring that truth to light. It's just at some point, it's like you start to kind of hit the ceiling when it comes to the law there. And of course, Lord Male Strongheart, he's the fucking law there. So, it's like there's only so much that he could do that, I mean, the only way it could have ended was with Hurley intervening the way that he did.
Yeah, I feel the same way, and I love it. I think it's brilliant. It's a fitting conclusion to everything that has been built up over this duology, and I just that moment where Ryunosuke has uncovered the identity again of both the Reaper and the Professor. And has really revolutionized the British judiciary system. It's no surprise then that his journey here in Britain is over and he's ready to go back to Japan and change the system there like Kazuma once intended. He's taking on Kazuma's dream. Yeah,
exactly. And of course, Kazuma, since initially he was going to Britain, of course it was under the guise of... there was an assassin's exchange going on, but I mean, he was still ostensibly going there to study the law and everything. So, I mean, he ends up staying as a prosecutor there, and that's pretty much the path that he takes as a lawyer. So, I mean, it just kind of goes to show you how, sometimes things kind of diverge in life,
Yeah, but there's one other thing I wanted to talk about with these pair of cases in particular, and what I think is the heart of these is Van Zieks himself. In a parallel of Turnabout Goodbyes, we have the rival prosecutor as the defendant in this case. And we also finally get an explanation for his racism.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it turns out that not only was Genshin Isogi kind of a friend of his, he saved his life once even.
Yeah. So... I have seen a criticism of the depiction of racism in The Great Ace Attorney. And, of course, you and I think, can already agree off the bat that the depiction of racism is not racist. In fact, this was written by Japanese people, and it's mostly anti-Japanese discrimination.
Yeah, definitely. No, we're in agreement there.
But, there is some criticism lobbied specifically at Van Zieks, and that the handling of racism in this case was, in that case in particular, maybe might not have been handled as well as it could, by making the source of his racism ultimately sympathetic. How do you feel about that?
I mean, it's a trope that's really kind of come up in this type of media before when it comes to, the sympathetic racist. Like a good example of that was that movie that came out in the mid 2010s. It was called Three Billboards Outside of Ebbings, Missouri, I believe it was. And that kind of had similar complaints because that it has a extremely racist cop who through more sympathetic means turns out to be not racist. And it's I mean, I can understand how that trope can elicit some eye rolls, you know, because I mean, I get how, you know, that's not a real representation of how racism works in the real world, obviously, you know, especially with it being more like a systemic type of thing. And honestly, I mean, when it comes to the individual, it's like, I mean, yeah, that plays into your core beliefs and how you, and your core prejudices and everything. But I mean, I can see how people can have issues with that. Now, that said, is that something that we could really level criticism on Van Zieks for? I mean, I think for one, it's not like his prejudices are necessarily out of character for someone from that time period. So it's actually it's pretty specific to his time period, but it also feels like it is specific to his overall experiences. And there are a lot of people who unfortunately can grow those type of bigoted beliefs that way, you know, outside of certain systems. But at the end of the day, it's still a systemic thing. And, you know, it's good to grow past those types of prejudices, you know, but you also still have to, you know, see the forest for the trees there, you know.
What you also have to understand about this, and on the greater topic of the depiction of racism here, is that this is a very unique period of history. And maybe this period of history isn't as well taught here where we live in the West, you know, as much as it is in Japan or even Britain. But, you know, there was a moment where essentially Japan was forced to end its isolation in the face of Britain's military force. But at the same time, they were sort of awestruck by the modernization and wanted to adopt that. And so, you know, when you see some characters react, like Ryunosuke and Susato, in a passive way, you have to kind of understand the historical context behind that. And again, this is anti-Japanese discrimination written by Japanese people. And I think it's important to the context of the story. And then there's an argument somewhere where, you know, you might think, well, if you're trying to tell a period story and make it realistic, you know, do you really need to? Because, you know, there's so many other things about this game that are unrealistic. And I feel like you're missing the mark when you make that sort of argument, because realism is a scale. And I watched a video that kind of talked about this in particular that was really good. And I wish I could. It was Ratatosker, did a video on the depiction of racism in Ace Attorney. That's really good. You should go check that out. You know, essentially, it's like how much can the depiction of realism help the story? And here, I think it works. And so, with Van Zieks in particular, here's how I choose to read it. You know, this is everything considered. Maybe there are some things that might have, you know, with a bigger budget or more time, might have had more time to get into. But I feel like with Van Zieks, his racism is both a product of his personal encounter and the bias, you know, at the time, the systemic prejudice, as you mentioned, Beau. You know, I think Van Zieks, before he met Genshin Asogi, was the sort of person who was raised in prejudice, and you know, that sort of was instilled to him, especially a member of the aristocracy. But as he and his brother met people that they regarded well, you know, that were foreigners, they would come to maybe reflect that, you know, some of these inner biases that they have are not fair, and that they should be doing more to fight against, you know, like that knee-jerk reaction that they have, to rise above it. But then something terrible happens.
Yeah.
And now Van Zieks no longer really feels that motivation to reflect on his internal prejudices and say, no, I shouldn't think that way. And he does touch on it. He does say that he didn't think that it was logical to think that way, but he couldn't think otherwise. And it's like, well, I mean, when the only Japanese person that you knew, or one of the only Japanese people that you knew, did this to you, on the surface, it does seem kind of underwhelming, because you're like, how could someone as smart as Van Zieks just despise an entire race because of one person that they met? But when you consider, you know, that this is a systemic prejudice, this is something that was instilled in them at a young age, something that they had to struggle to sort of rise against. And now, you know, you're kind of removing a lot of their motivation to do so. And again, Van Zieks realizes the irrationality of his thought process. And we can argue back and forth about whether we think he's punished well enough for what he did. You know, if I recall correctly, he does legitimately apologize to Ryunosuke for the way that he treats him. He tells him he's sorry, not only for personal attacks, but, you know, for the actual racism. And so, and I mean, dude did end up having to face some pretty difficult shit. So it's like, man, it's been through the ringer. Like, I feel like he understands the folly of his view of thinking and does turn around on it. And so I think the depiction of Van Zieks' racism is actually handled incredibly well.
And you also have to kind of remember that at this particular period of history, I mean, Great Britain was still very much a colonial empire. They were still colonial. They were still colonially occupying like India. They were still occupying most of Africa. I mean, and I mean, thankfully, Japan was never really touched by that. By said colonialism because of their overall isolationism and everything. But so in a way, that is kind of, you know, isolationist Japan just kind of finally reckoning with the colonial structure of the British Empire there.
Yeah.
And how that colonialism very much... It's very much where a lot of today's systems of racist equality, of racial inequality and whatnot, those systems very much branched out of those types of colonial attitudes. So, I mean, it's just worth it to kind of keep that in mind when playing this game. You know, it's like, I mean, we're still talking about a colonial superpower at this point. You know, still actively engaging in colonial oppression against other typically non-white nations and everything, and peoples.
And where you might ask, you know, why don't Runo and Susie say something about this? You know, like, because all Runo seems to do really is ponder on, well, why does Van Zieks feel this way? But you never really see them kind of come out and attack the idea head on. But you have to think, like, what choice did they have? Given the cultural identity of Japan at this point, like where they stood in the relationship with Great Britain, and just how wide the gap was in terms of technology at that time, and then also, you know, the fact that, and in this case specifically, Ryunosuke and Susato are there on no certain terms. I mean, Runo wasn't even supposed to be there.
Yeah.
and it's already a very what's the word I'm looking for? Contentious relationship, you know, and this sort of like student exchange that's happening, you know, like it's already very, very tempestuous.
Yes.
And on top of that, you know, like I said, Ryunosuke wasn't even supposed to be there originally. So, like, you can kind of understand why they can be so passive in these scenarios. And again, you know, like, you got to understand the historical context, the plot context, and everything. And honestly, like, I feel like the depiction of racism here is spot on. I think that this is incredibly well done. I think it serves a very important, you know, purpose in the narrative, and without it, we wouldn't have the same game.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's arguably where something like the Great Ace Attorney digs a little bit deeper than the mainline Ace Attorney games do. I mean, I don't feel like, you know, the Phoenix Wright or the Apollo Justice trilogy ever really tackled any social issues large scale like this.
No. I mean, it's like I said in the first review for the first game. These games are a much more deeply political animal than the previous Ace Attorney games, in the Phoenix Wright universe and everything. I mean, this and that's part of what makes it so grounded is that, it has a real political reality to it that kind of takes into consideration what was actually going on in the world at that time. I mean, we actively have we still have Russia, post Bolshevik Revolution. We have Japan coming out of its isolationist era. We have the British Empire and pretty much in full swing, and probably even reaching its technological peak here. So,
100%. Well, on that note, I guess we're sort of running on time here. So, what are your final thoughts on the Great Ace Attorney 2 Resolve and the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles as a whole?
Game of the year. Games of the year. This needs all the awards. All the awards, damn it. But no, like I said, this is a really, really great duo of games that takes a completely different approach to the Ace Attorney formula and the Ace Attorney universe and everything. I love the characters. I love the little family that Hurley, Iris, Susie, and Runo have. I mean, this second game right here, it takes some chances with some of the narrative and some of the characters from the first game that I really, really do like. And I mean, yeah, the way that the cases were structured, I mean, it kept my it kept my attention and everything. And the fact that we don't really have any really bad filler cases here really helps with the pacing and everything. So I think overall these are games that you should definitely check out. I would even go so far as to say, like, play the first Great Ace Attorney before you play anything else. I think,
Really?
because it's a solid prequel to. And it's a solid prequel to the original Ace Attorney timeline, and it's also a really interesting way to introduce the Ace Attorney formula to people.
I think it's as good an entry point as almost anything else. I'm still of the opinion that the very first Ace Attorney is the best entry point for a multitude of reasons, but this isn't a bad one. You could start here. If you feel like you're going to be a bit more inclined to like this series based on the Victorian setting or a stronger political message, then 100%, this may be an individual thing. So, yeah, as far as the quality goes, I feel that the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles is a step above the original trilogy. I mean, we've had the benefit of, a few years, to say the least. And Shu Takumi, these are the first games that he was involved in since his departure with Apollo Justice. I think he also worked on Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright, but that's a spinoff. But he wasn't involved in, Dual Destinies or Spirit of Justice. This is the continuation of Shu Takumi's work on the franchise. And so I feel like, the benefit of time and ratings, and just knowing what works, has allowed him to make, from an objective standpoint, a better product. Now, for me, the original Ace Attorney trilogy just has this charm that really sets it apart, and it was how I was introduced to the franchise, so it always hold a special place in my heart that I'm not sure, in any installment may have the capacity to override. We'll see, but the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles come damn close. I mean, it is just neck and neck. This is as close to the quality of the original trilogy as it gets. From a certain perspective, again, actually a step above. But in terms of like how I personally favor these, they're damn fucking close. The Great Ace Attorney 2 is a fantastic resolution to the events that were raised in the first game. I can see where things might have been a little bit rushed. And where they were met with budget constraints, because apparently these games didn't do all that well in Japan. But It's very, very minor. I mean, I have maybe only the most minor of nitpicks about how the way, how the story beats were handled, if any. And, I feel like, again, these are two parts of one story, and they're done incredibly well. I feel like there are moments where this duology digs a little bit deeper. Again, in terms of political, or in terms of socio-political issues, and even just character development. Like, we really get a lot of excellent character development, and I'm so thankful for that. I'm so thankful to be able to experience these. That they both of these games were eventually released internationally, and that you can play them on modern platforms. So yeah, 100%. If you think that you're gonna be, based on the way that we've been talking about these games, I know we spoiled the hell out of them. So if you haven't played these games and you're wondering, but like you think, hey, I feel like the Great Ace Attorney might be more my vibe than the Ace Attorney trilogy, I still recommend you go and witness, these things firsthand, because it honestly is very, very excellent. This is just top tier right here. I sometimes wonder, if Shu Takumi or the development team at Capcom is even capable of surpassing this. Ace Attorney 7, I'm not sure, what is down the line for that, whether Takumi wants to be involved, or if, this was kind of his send-off. I wouldn't blame him if he wanted to put a bow in his career with this franchise.
Yeah.
With these two games, honestly, because, again, I felt like this is a perfect conclusion to Ryunosuke's story. I don't feel like there's any more stories to tell with him here, but I would like to explore the setting more. That's why the idea that I think we both independently came to, of an investigation-style spinoff starring Herlock Sholmes would be fantastic, because, again, Herlock is just... he is my very favorite character in this franchise.
He is, and just there's so many ways that they could take his character and utilize it within the framework of the investigations games, and especially translating like the dance of deduction and everything into that, and maybe adding some other little kind of detection elements to it that could make it a little bit of fun,
Yeah, exactly. I would love to see it. I have any excuse to jump back into the setting and at least get to see these characters again. Because, I feel like you could do an investigation-style game and have, like, maybe one case be set during that time that he mentions he's going to visit Japan and see, and have, like, Ryunosuke and Susato, like, kind of be involved in that case. I feel like that would be cool.
I want to see Hurley in Japan so badly. Oh my god, that would be so hilarious.
And get a nice partner moment with Mikotoba, like maybe build it up and like kind of wait until like the fourth or fifth case to do it, and then like bring Hurley to Japan finally. Like maybe you can have it to where like he's already making the plans for Japan, but he keeps getting like delayed, and he keeps getting embroiled in these mysteries along the way, and then finally he makes it to Japan, and we get that build up, and we get a nice partner moment between the famous Sholmes and Wilson duo.
Hell yeah, man! Hell yeah.
But yeah, Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. What else can I say? If I were to rate this, I would easily give it a perfect score.
Yeah, game of the year, man. Game of the fucking year.
5 out of 5, 10 out of 10. Probably up there in like my top 5. The Ace Attorney franchise as a whole is up there in like my top 5 video games of all time, and like this is right near the top. This is just like it's amazing, man. It really is. If you were asking me my personal rankings, Trials and Tribulations I think is still my very favorite game, followed by the original Ace Attorney, followed by Great Ace Attorney 1 and 2. And
hell yeah.
I would rank them higher than Justice for All even.
Damn, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So there you go. That's personally where they stand. And again, they're two parts of one story. So it's kind of hard for me to rank one over the other, because I feel like one had the benefit of a bigger budget and more time to develop its ideas, that maybe the writing is a little better, but it's an incomplete story, and it's not, it's not a full product without its conclusion. And so,
exactly.
Yeah. And also just where the story goes and like the heights of it. Cause I mean, these final cases are just among the top of my case rankings as well.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, we'll be covering the Ace Attorney franchise again very soon here with the Ace Attorney Investigations Collection coming out just next month. So we'll have covered everything that Ace Attorney has to offer in one way or the other on this podcast. Of course, that doesn't preclude the possibility of Let's Plays, or I'd love to do maybe like a bonus round focused on Ace Attorney at some point where maybe we could do like a top 5 list or...
Yeah, that sounds like something that we could do.
And definitely the opportunity to revisit some of the entries of this franchise that we didn't get a chance to talk about, with full spoilers or whatnot, or possibly a redux at some point. Because, I mean, you and I both just like fell in love with this franchise.
Absolutely, man. I mean, this pretty much saved gaming for me, I mean, it pretty much brought me back into the modern world of video games. So, yeah, I mean, definitely, I love this series.
Hell yeah, man. And again, these two games represent some of the very best of it. That's something that we've got in store for Collateral Gaming in the future. And we'll talk a little bit more about what's in the immediate future. But before we do that, Beau, what's going on with Collateral Cinema?
Well, by this point, we should have released our Mike-versary episode featuring Happiness of the Katakuris. That's our 7th or 8th anniversary, I believe. So check that out. And we're also going to have our season 2 review of home movies coming out with a little help from Robbie from Conversations with Robbie. So yeah, definitely check that out. And season 8 of Collateral Cinema starts in October, and I can at least confirm that the season premiere will be the first 2 Terrifier movies. So, I mean, we're just going to go ahead, watch those 2 movies, and just talk about Art the Clown for a little while. Fuck
yeah, man. I'm excited. As for Collateral Gaming, our season finale is going to be 007 Nightfire. So previously, Doom was going to be the season finale. We're moving that to the season premiere in September, as long as everything goes to plan. So very soon here, we'll have out parts 1 and 2 of Nightfire, and then we may also have more in the way of post-season content if we have any time here this month. As far as I know, I definitely have an idea or two for game lunch review, and it would be nice to get a bonus round in there somewhere. So we'll see what happens as far as the release goes, but at the very least, we're going to be wrapping up this season with Nightfire and then opening up with Doom 1993 and Doom 2016. We'll do a 2-part season premiere comparing those 2 games. And I'm excited to actually jump into that franchise properly.
Hell yeah, man. I mean, the first Doom is so amazing. I mean, by the way, be right back. I'm going to go play Doom on my mom's new sewing machine. Which has a built-in computer, apparently. But yeah, I mean, yeah. The joke is that you can pretty much play Doom on anything.
That's true. Yeah, that is the running gag. So yeah, go play Dune on fucking rice grain or whatever, and come enjoy that review with us.
Find a calculator. You could run Doom on it.
But very quickly, because we're running on damn near 2 hours here on this episode, if you want to support our show, feel free to donate to our Patreon and get exclusive to what we do have in the way of Let's Play video game commentaries. And as soon as I get a setup, I'd love to upload more of those. Also, go check out our merch store on TeePublic, where we have everything from T-shirts to baseball caps to fucking tapestries, man. We've got all sorts of shit on TeePublic. So go get you some Collateral Media swag and support the show. And you can help us climb the ranks on Good Pods. Check us out wherever you get your podcasts and also on social media. We'll have links in the show notes to all of that. And also check out Collateral Let's Play on YouTube. We do have those uploaded right now on the Collateral Cinema channel. Beau does those mostly weekly, yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of taking a little break from it right now because we're in pre-production for the podcast, but I will be planning on coming back with at least with Beat 'em Up Fridays, and very soon I'm going to start my own playthrough of the original Ace Attorney trilogy. So look for that coming very soon. I'm going to try to drag Robert over here and make him play those games because he needs to be on our level.
Yeah, for sure.
Like on the real, Robert, you need to play real video games. Real video games, Robert.
Real video games.
Real video games. We're not gonna fucking do Le Mans on Gran Turismo 7 for 30 years. Robert. No, but of course I'm kidding. Of course, you know.
Well, thus concludes Collateral Gaming's Logic and Reasoning Spectacular on the mystery of the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. Although I don't know, Beau, maybe we should just go on for another hour, make it 3 hours. What do you have to say about that?
Oh, I think I'm going to say
objection. Collateral Gaming is a Collateral Media podcast. All music and game clips are owned by their respective creators and are used for educational purposes only. Please don't sue us. We're poor.